Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a topic that literally transforms how organizations handle their environmental responsibilities. We're talking about ISO 14001:2026, and specifically, Clause 4.1. Now, if you've ever felt like an environmental management system, an EMS, is basically just the corporate equivalent of an unused gym membership, just a giant, tedious paperwork exercise gathering dust on a shelf, well, get ready to completely change your perspective. We are going to explore exactly how this one specific clause takes your EMS from a dusty binder and turns it into an absolute strategic powerhouse that drives real-world resilience. Okay, let's dive right into this, because we really have to start by confronting a hard truth. Why do so many of these systems just completely fail? I mean, you see organizations spend months, sometimes years, building an EMS, only to have the whole thing collapse under the weight of an actual environmental challenge or, a lead auditor's scrutiny. Well, the reason is simple, but it's devastating. They're built in a theoretical vacuum. A lot of times, organizations just use these generic, copied and pasted templates that have absolutely nothing to do with their actual day-to-day operations. And as we're going to see today, Clause 4.1 is specifically designed to destroy that vacuum. Here's the architectural journey we'll be taking today to ensure your EMS aligns with real-world risks. We'll cover why organizational context matters, Clause 4.1 as the foundation, the 4 contextual factors shaping the EMS design, avoiding cascading failures, and finally, documenting true relevance. Let's jump into Section 1, why organizational context matters.
So, like we just talked about, an EMS built in a theoretical vacuum is absolutely destined to fail. But why is that? Well, because an organization doesn't operate in a void. It operates within this incredibly complex, dynamic web of ecological systems, shifting climate factors, and really strict regulatory expectations. If an organization just ignores the actual physical, legal, and economic environment they operate in, their policies are going to completely lack credibility. That's why formal issue identification isn't just a nice-to-have suggestion, it's a structural requirement. You can't just write a generic policy that says, hey, we will prevent pollution. Because if you don't understand the specific environmental context of your site, let's say you're located right next to a protected wetland, your generic policy is going to completely fail to address your actual, real-world environmental impacts.
Moving right along to Section 2, Clause 4.1, the foundation.
The core definition we really need to wrap our heads around here is organizational context. This is the internal and external issues that affect an organization's ability to achieve its intended environmental management outcomes. Let's unpack that for a second, because this isn't just some descriptive background information. This right here is the absolute heart of the internal and external issue identification requirements under Clause 4.1. It's the strategic lens for the entire system. It's basically the ultimate organizational reality check. It actively forces leadership to look outward at climate risks and regulations and then inward at their own culture and resources long before they write a single objective.
So the crucial point is that Clause 4.1 is the strategic starting point for your entire Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. As this quote perfectly highlights, environmental strategy only becomes meaningful when it's grounded in a crystal-clear understanding of organizational purpose and your operational environment. It dictates the actual boundaries of your system and ensures that environmental management is baked directly into corporate governance and business strategy, rather than just operating as some siloed check-the-box compliance function.
Which brings us to Section 3, the 4 contextual factors.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how Clause 4.1 actually requires the identification of 4 distinct factors to inform your EMS design. We're talking environmental, regulatory, technological, and competitive factors. Let's look at the environmental factor first. A chemical plant located in a region facing severe water scarcity absolutely has to prioritize water recycling, right? Otherwise, their EMS is useless. Or take the regulatory factor. An e-waste recycler has to track rapidly changing hazardous waste laws or they're risking immediate shutdown. For the technological factor, think about how the availability of real-time automated emissions monitoring completely changes what kind of operational controls are actually possible for a facility. And finally, competitively, if your customers are demanding sustainable packaging solutions, well, your EMS needs to address lifecycle material sourcing just to keep your business viable in the market. Context is real, it's physical, and it absolutely impacts the bottom line.
Next up, Section 4, shaping the EMS design. So how does all this theory actually shape the system? Well, it works through a very direct pipeline. Step 1 is the context analysis we just broke down. That directly informs Step 2, which is your scope. Think about it. If your context shows your supply chain has massive environmental impacts, your scope might need to expand way beyond just your factory walls. Step 3 is risk evaluation. And let's be honest, you literally can't identify a risk if you don't know your context.
And finally, step 4, environmental objectives. Your goals are born directly out of the risks and the scope you just identified. It's a perfectly logical flow. The outside world completely dictates the boundaries, the risks, and the goals inside the organization. But wait, external pressures are only half the requirement. Clause 4.1's internal issue identification requirements demand that we take a hard look inside too. Your organizational culture, your governance structures, your current technological capabilities, workforce competence, and, of course, financial resource availability, these are just as critical as those external pressures. Why? Well, because you can have the absolute most ambitious environmental goals in the entire world, but if your workforce lacks the competence to operate that flashy new green technology, or your leadership simply won't allocate the budget for it, your EMS is going to fail. Period. Internal context absolutely dictates the realistic operational controls you can actually put in place.
Let's move to Section 5, Avoiding Cascading System Failures. Let's move to and see how this builds, because there is a terrifying domino effect if you get this wrong. Let's say on day 1, you decide to treat Clause 4.1 as just a quick paperwork exercise. Well, a failure here means that by month 3, when you're looking at Clause 6 for planning, your identified risks are totally misaligned with reality. Then, by month 6, under Clause 8, your operational controls are super weak because, hey, they're controlling the wrong risks. And by year 1, under Clause 9, your performance evaluation is basically just blind monitoring. You are successfully measuring things that simply don't matter. A failure in context propagates all the way through planning, operations, and evaluation, ultimately leading to massive systemic nonconformances during an audit.
A major cause of this cascading failure is treating context as something static, doing the analysis once for certification, printing it out, and just throwing it in a drawer. That guarantees eventual failure. Instead, ISO 14001 requires a dynamic context. Environmental conditions evolve continuously. Climate regulations shift, brand new technologies emerge, market expectations change. Your EMS must continuously adapt to these climate and tech shifts. It's a living, breathing system, not some historical document.
And finally, Section 6, Documenting True Environmental Relevance.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. Lead auditors are highly trained to spot superficial context the second they walk in the door. If they see generic industry templates and vaguely copied regulations, they instantly know the EMS is misaligned. Genuine context, on the other hand, is highly specific. It documents your site-specific climate risks, your highly localized municipal laws, and honest, real assessments of the organization's actual technological capacity. That is the exact kind of reality-based documentation that proves your EMS is actually capable of delivering real environmental outcomes.
So what objective evidence do lead auditors actively look for to ensure the completeness of organizational context documentation? Well, they want to see the receipts. They look for regulatory trend analysis showing you are actively anticipating new laws. They want to see competitor benchmarking, showing you actually understand market pressures. They look at your stakeholder engagement records. Are you actually talking to the local community? They'll review your technology investment strategies to see if you are really planning for cleaner operations. And crucially, they look for documented management reviews to ensure leadership is continually reevaluating all of this context. These are the artifacts that prove your context analysis isn't just a copied template.
To summarize our deep dive today, I really want you to keep this core takeaway in mind. Clause 4.1 ensures environmental management systems operate within real-world conditions rather than theoretical frameworks. True sustainability isn't just about following the rules. It requires leadership to proactively embed contextual awareness, all those environmental, regulatory, technological, and competitive realities we talked about, directly into everyday business strategy. Which leaves us with one final, absolutely vital question that you need to ask yourselves right now. If an auditor walked into your facility today and opened up your context documentation, would your EMS truly reflect your dynamic, real-world risks? Or would they just find a generic copied template? I think it's time to interrogate your foundational documentation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay focused, keep learning, and I will see you in the next one.